Welcome dear students. Today we shall talk about cultivation and utility of buckwheat. The name phagopyrum is derived from the Greek word phagos meaning beech and pyrum meaning wheat, and the common name buckwheat is from Buckwheat, German for beech wheat, because of the triangular seeds that look like beech nuts. However, it's neither a nut nor a cereal, but is categorized as a separate group called pseudocereals because it has both similarities and dissimilarities with cereals. Further, it is not considered a true cereal because cereals are monocots, unlike buckwheat, which is dicot and contains a cereal-like starchy endosperm. Reports have revealed that depending on their botanical origin, the starch granules of buckwheat differ in size, shape, and composition. The morphology of buckwheat shows that it is an annual, broad-leaved plant and attains a maximum height of about 0.6 to 1.5 meters. Buckwheat belongs to family Polygonaceae and genus Phagopyrum, which comprises approximately 34 species, including both diploids and tetraploids. Further, Phagopyrum is categorized in two groups, that is, cymosome group has big lusterless achenes partially enclosed within insistent perianth and consists of 8 species, and the Urophyllum group, which has small lustrous achenes thoroughly enclosed with insistent perianth and constitutes approximately 16 species. Phagopyrum esculentum, Phagopyrum tataricum, Phagopyrum homotropicum, and Phagopyrum cymosum are included in the cymosome group along with allotetraploid perennial species, that is, Phagopyrum cymosum and its two diploid varieties, Phagopyrum cymosum variety Pilus and Phagopyrum cymosum variety Megaspartanium of the cymosome group, forming the cymosome complex. Data has also revealed that Phagopyrum megaspartanium and Phagopyrum pilus of the cymosome complex might be the ancestors of the two commonly cultivated buckwheat species, that is, Phagopyrum tataricum and Phagopyrum esculentum, based on certain parameters such as the meiotic behavior of hybrid chromosome, DNA polymorphism, and allozyme analysis. In Jammu and Kashmir, 4 different Phagopyrum species are cultivated: Phagopyrum esculentum, Phagopyrum tataricum, Phagopyrum sagittatum, and Phagopyrum kashmirianum, and one species viz. Phagopyrum cymosum, which grows wild and is propagated through rhizome. Moreover, the species of Phagopyrum that have been found so far are diploid, except Phagopyrum cymosum and Phagopyrum gracilepus, which are tetraploid in nature. Buckwheat is characterized by a single upright and hollow stem that exhibits color variation ranging from green to red and turns brown at maturity. The shape of the leaves is heart-shaped or triangular and is arranged alternatively on the stem. The flower is attractive and is usually clustered in racemes at the tip of the branches or on short pedicels emerging from the leaf axils, and the inflorescence is composed of 7 to 9 blossoms. Moreover, the flowers are bisexual in nature with apparent parts that include 3 to 5 sepals and petals, 6 to 9 stamens, and a single pistil, and the color of the flower ranges from white or light green to pink or red. The ovary is superior and possesses one locule with an egg that develops into an achene, and the base of the ovary is associated with nectar-secreting glands. One of the specialized properties of buckwheat is that it exhibits sexual dimorphism. That is, it comprises of two types of flowers, viz. pin flowers consisting of a short stamen and long pistil and thumb flowers with a long stamen and short pistil. Depending upon the variety, the shape of the seed varies from triangular to wing-shaped, and the texture of the seeds ranges from glossy brown or black to silvery gray. The seeds comprises an outer thick covering known as hull with a lesser density than water and an inner part, that is growth, that resembles a cereal kernel in its raw chemical composition and structure. Phagopyrum esculentum has a softer scale than its relative species Phagopyrum tataricum. In addition, buckwheat has a dense, fibrous root system with deep taproot that makes up about 3 to 4% of the total plant weight. Origin and distribution of buckwheat. Buckwheat is believed to have originated in Central Asia, but the origin of its domestication date back 4,000 to 5,000 years in southern China. The earliest findings of buckwheat came from a tomb of the Western Han Dynasty, where the seeds of common buckwheat were dated from the 1st to 2nd century and thus is regarded as the original center of buckwheat. The history of buckwheat revealed that it is originated in the Central Asia, where it was widely cultivated as a main or supplementary food, and it was brought to Europe during the Middle Ages. It proposed that the Dalian-Shan region is amongst the places of origin of Tartary buckwheat, based on the large number of wild buckwheat types, particular ecological and traditional practices related to buckwheat. On the basis of research findings on buckwheat and the national history of Yunnan, it originated in southwestern China on the eastern side of the Himalayas. More precisely, Yunnan, Dalian-Shan, Zhou-Lianshan, and the border regions of Yunnan and Sichuan were the centers of origin of buckwheat. Thus, due to the widespread nature of wild buckwheat, species, cultivation, history, phylogenetic analysis, historical evidences, and molecular studies confirm that southwest China was not only the distribution center but the center of origin of its cultivated species. After the domestication of buckwheat in southwest China, it later spread into other areas through two routes, one from southwest to northern China, then to the Korean peninsula and later to Japan, and the other from China via Tibet to Bhutan, Nepal and India, then via Kashmir to Poland. One of the oldest written references in which buckwheat is mentioned was in Claret's Wurst Glossary, which dates from around the year 1365 AD. It was imported into European countries during 13th century via Silk Road during invasions by Mongolian, Turkish and other troops. Later it was introduced into Central Europe and Bohemian lands, probably via two separate routes, either outside the Carpathians via Polish territory or the Danubian region. Buckwheat was the most important food in Japan in 800 AD. It spread to Europe via Siberia and southern Russia from 1200 to 1300 AD. Countries like Ukraine, Germany, and Slovenia were possibly the first countries to grow buckwheat in Europe, and then Belgians, French, Italians, and English started growing buckwheat in the 17th century. After the 17th century, buckwheat was brought to America by the Dutch, and nowadays buckwheat is widely cultivated on large scale around the world in many countries. Among Asian countries, buckwheat is cultivated in India, Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Mongolia, North Korea, Far Eastern Russia, and Japan. Recently, Japan has increased the cultivated area of common buckwheat, particularly in transformed paddy fields. Buckwheat cultivation also takes place in Europe, the United States, the Canada, Australia and South Africa. In India, it was first cultivated in the Himalayan region and is commonly known as kuttu, fafra in Hindi, and in Kumaon as ogal. Buckwheat is generally consumed by the Hindus on particular fasting days, especially during Navratra. The crop is widely grown in the high mountains of Jammu and Kashmir in the west to Arunachal Pradesh in the east. It is densely cultivated in high altitudinal regions of Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, West Bengal, Sikkim, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, and Manipur. In Kashmir, buckwheat is commonly known as tromboshirin. During the 19th century, the first date related to buckwheat cultivation in Kashmir was described by Lawrence in 1895. Buckwheat was introduced into Kashmir probably around 1200 AD. Lawrence describes the buckwheat as an important and hardy crop. People in the higher reaches of Kashmir often cultivated buckwheat as substitute for rice because it was suitable for earning a living. In different regions of Ladakh, buckwheat is known by various names such as Diat, Dro, Bro, and Fafar. In Kargil, generally two variants of buckwheat are grown, which include the yellow-colored, small-sized broshak and black-colored, larger-sized gamrus. A few years ago, buckwheat was one of the staple foods of Ladakh. Kisir or giziri, which is actually similar to the plain dosa, is one of the famous dishes prepared from buckwheat flour in Kargil district of Ladakh division. Recently, the cultivation and consumption of buckwheat has been rapidly declining. Currently, many researchers all over the world focus on buckwheat cultivation due to its tremendous nutritional and medicinal properties. Buckwheat is known as versatile, age-old crops of Asia, Central and Eastern Europe, which has been primarily grown for its grains and greens, particularly in arid regions of the world. It thrives well in poor soil fertility conditions and is a multi-purpose crop mainly grown for human consumption, livestock and poultry feed as green crop, soil binding crop and a cover crop. Now we shall talk about the agronomic practices of buckwheat, preparation of land and sowing. Buckwheat is a short duration crop and thrives well in properly drained sandy loam soils and usually prefers moist and cool climatic conditions. Besides, it is also well adapted to acidic soils with pH less than 5. Buckwheat does not require any sophisticated land preparation and has the capability to adapt well even in the soils that are poorly tilled. But it shows poor growth rate in saline and semi-arid regions. Before sowing, land should be prepared in advance in order to enhance the porosity of the soil. There should be proper drainage system to avoid seed submergence, as waterlogging will have a negative impact on the seed germination process and ultimately will decline the production yield. Seed sowing is one of the main criteria essential for production yield due to its important effects on the genotype of plant. In case of buckwheat, growing season varies depending upon the agroclimatic conditions. The sowing season starts with the onset of monsoon and continues up to August. At lower altitudinal areas, it is mostly sown in the month of May to August, while as at higher altitudinal regions, it is usually sown in the month of April to May. Besides, it has also been reported that early June seedlings produces the highest buckwheat yields. In China, the best sowing time is more likely to be in late May with a maximum yield of 2059 kgs per hectare with respect to April and June. In European countries, the optimum sowing time is from mid-May to July to avoid frosts. Seeds should be sown at a depth of about 4 to 6 centimeters. However, seeds should be sown deeper during dry climatic conditions. The seeds are generally sown in rows 10 centimeters apart or distributed randomly across the fields at a rate of 35 to 40 kg per hectare. When grown as a cereal crop, but are around 50 kg per hectare when grown as a smothering or cover or fodder crop. In addition, seeding rate should be restricted as it alters the growth of the plant, thus resulting in lower production yield, and the thinning may be started after 20 days from sowing. Due to its allelopathic nature, the crop does not require weeding. Buckwheat, being the cover crop, should be sown at a higher rate in those fields where growth rate of weeds is higher. It is recommended that 16 plants per square feet are suitable for optimum production. Due to high degree of plasticity in buckwheat, it branches extensively recompense for lower plant populations. Buckwheat is a spring thermophilous plant species. In moist soil, buckwheat seeds begin to germinate at a temperature of 7 to 8 degree, but do not germinate when the temperature range is 0 to 4 degrees centigrade. The optimum temperature for germination is 25 to 26 degrees centigrade. Nutritional requirements for the growth. The crop yield efficiency primarily depends on the soil nutrients analyzed by soil tests. Generally, buckwheat grows on less fertile soil and is thus considered as crop of poor fertility soils. Soils with high fertility are not suitable for the cultivation of buckwheat because it leads to lodging, which makes it vulnerable to strong winds and heavy rains. Moreover, soil rich in nitrogen content is also not suitable for production of buckwheat as it declines the lignin content and other related enzymes, thus makes the plant prone to lodging. Besides, it also causes limited seed setting and delayed maturity. Buckwheat is often regarded as phosphorus scavenger because it has the ability to utilize phosphorus efficiently from the soil. Phosphorus scavenging efficiency of buckwheat results in the early maturity and helps the plant to prevent lodging. Therefore, buckwheat requires both nitrogen and phosphorus in a specific ratio for the efficient management. Buckwheat has the unique feature to solubilize phosphorus, which otherwise may be unavailable to plants by excreting some substances from the roots at the growing stage. Besides, the roots also found to have a high storage capacity for inorganic phosphate. Therefore, buckwheat can be used as a manure crop as it undergoes decomposition quickly, making phosphorus and other nutrients easily available to the succeeding crop. Buckwheat exhibits an excellent response to an even-handed fertilizer program, but it is not considered as an intense nutrient user. The fertilizer recommended for growing buckwheat includes nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to harvest a yield of approximately 1600 kgs per hectare. In India, maximum yield is obtained upon applying nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium at the rate of 50:20:40 kg or 1500 to 2000 kg farmyard manure per hectare. In sandy loam soils, it is suggested to add potash to the soil. Besides, in fields with high nitrogen level, buckwheat shows lodging and ultimately declines its production yield. Application of fertilizers greatly influences the grain yield and composition, such as urea enhances the content of dry matter, protein, and soluble sugars, while as ammonium nitrate increases the grain yield. Buckwheat also suppresses weeds during growing season by releasing allelopathic compounds, and thus is being used for rejuvenating soils lacking in nutrition and having annual weed problem. Buckwheat responds well to potassium fertilizers, especially in the form of sulfate than chlorides. Moreover, buckwheat grows in soils with high aluminum content because of its ability to ooze out organic acids that causes chelation of the aluminum in the root rhizosphere. Buckwheat is considered an efficient green manure crop due to its fast growing rate, enrichment of soil nutrients, particularly nitrogen phosphorus mobilization, fast decay rate, and better litter quality. Now, pollination management in buckwheat. Buckwheat prefers cross pollination, thus, entomophily is an effective mode of pollination to produce seed set. However, the degree of pollination efficiency rely upon various parameters such as morphology of flowers, insect abundance, nectar production, transfer and deposition of pollen on an appropriate stigma. Nectar production is influenced by age of the plant, position of inflorescence, heteromorphy, ploidy level, and environmental factors. Besides, buckwheat exhibits sexual dimorphism, that is, common buckwheat produces two types of flowers, such as pins having short stamen and long pistil, and thrums having long stamen and short pistil. This dimorphic characterization makes common buckwheat self-incompatible. However, tartary buckwheat exhibited homomorphic types of flowers and thus possess the ability of self-fertilization. Honey bee is the efficient pollinator as it visited both types of flowers, pins and thrums, for nectar collection. Besides, due to its foraging and prospecting behavior, it accelerates intermittent contacts with stigma. As thrum type flowers oozes out more nectar than pin type, thus the honey bee spends majority of the time period on thrum type flowers. For the maximal production of buckwheat, one honey bee colony per acre is sufficient for effective pollination, especially during sunny and warm days. It has been reported that the optimum temperature for effective pollination is 20 degrees centigrade. Honeybee is a predominant pollinator and visits approximately 14 to 20 flowers per minute, and it has been estimated it works about 4 to 5 hours per day. The rate of pollination is also affected by low temperature, as it declines the sucrose production and thus modifies the relative levels of sugars in buckwheat nectar. It is revealed that sugar secretion per flower can be approximately 15 times higher during cool and humid conditions than in dry climatic conditions. Now, pest and disease management of buckwheat. Generally, buckwheat is resistant to severe pests and diseases. However, there are few reports of pathogenic problems. Various scoop caterpillars such as Yoxa triticale, Yoxa sagittum, Trichia atriplicus, Phytometra gamma, Barathra brassicae cause damage to buckwheat shoot. Moreover, some polyphytophagus are responsible for causing damage to root portions. Phytophage species like Chaetonema consina cause damage to stalk and young leaves. For some pests such as Meligithis anus, flowers also act as forage material. The other pests of buckwheat include wireworms, birds, rodents, and aphids. It has also been reported that earlier cultivation of buckwheat than the recommended time period is prone to aphid attacks and thus declines the crop production. These aphids oozes out a greasy and sugary substances known as honeydew that encourages the growth of sooty mold on plants and thus causes damage to the plants. To avoid such infestations, a chemical petroleum servo agro spray at the rate of 7 ml per liter or neem oil 1500 parts per million at the rate 3 ml per liter could be used for the effective management of aphids. Besides, it is reported that 20 viruses, including tobacco mosaic virus, cucumber virus, CMV, and few bacteria are associated with buckwheat. The severe pests of buckwheat include beetles and their larvae that affect the shoots during early June. However, the larvae cause curvature of stem and make the plant liable to lodging, besides causing severe damage to nectiferous glands. Previous study revealed that the pests like Rhinococcus sibiricus causes approximately 30 to 50% reduction in the yield of Phagopyrum esculentum. Now, crop harvesting and storage. As buckwheat exhibits indeterminate growth habit, therefore it is very difficult to determine the specific harvesting time period. So swathing is an essential step to minimize the shattering losses. However, swathing should be done during early morning to minimize the shattering losses. Shattering causes about 20 to 25% yield losses in buckwheat. Moreover, agroclimatic conditions also influences the harvesting period of buckwheat because at higher altitudes harvesting is done during late season, while as at moderate and lower altitudes harvesting is done very early. Under normal conditions, harvesting is done approximately 10 weeks after planting. It has been observed that harvesting of buckwheat should be done when approximately 70 to 75% seeds are matured and most of the leaves have been cast off. At this stage, thrashing becomes easy process as most of the seeds fall out quickly. Buckwheat should not be stored for longer time period because of its susceptibility to rancidity. Before storage, seeds should be well dried and the optimum moisture content and temperature for drying is approximately about 16% and 45° respectively. Now, buckwheat as a smart cover crop in intercropping system. Buckwheat is regarded as a smart crop and is used for intercropping system with soybean, potato, hemp, millet, safflower and sunflower. Most of the farmers use buckwheat as cover crop as it has the capability to soften the soil besides enriching it with various nutrients. Buckwheat secretes a bioactive compound like diethyl phthalate that causes suppression of weeds around its periphery. Moreover, buckwheat possesses the ability to alter the nitrogen content and makes it unavailable to the weeds, thus inhibiting their growth. Buckwheat has carbon to nitrogen ratio of 34 that immobilizes the nitrogen content during decomposition. Buckwheat pellets used in rice fields before planting increases the production of rice and suppresses the weeds. Furthermore, compared to other crops such as clover, wheat, maize and sorghum, buckwheat is rich source of calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium and other micronutrients, zinc, iron, manganese, thus enrich the soil quality as reported by various authors. Buckwheat is considered as an efficient phosphorus scavenger, so cultivation of buckwheat enriches the phosphorus content in the soil by about 10 times compared to wheat. Now we shall talk about nutritional attributes of buckwheat. Buckwheat is a crop that has gained a global attention because of its economic, nutraceutical and pharmaceutical properties. In the current scenario of global climate change, This pseudo cereal is a promising alternative to achieve food and nutrition security. It is expected that the demand of this particular crop is going to increase in the coming years due to its high nutraceutical potential. It is enriched with important metabolites such as rutin, quercetin, orientin, vitexin, isovitexin, and isoorientin that are known to possess health promoting benefits. Besides, it is also an important source of vitamins, minerals, lignans, dietary fibers, phagopyrins, and fatty acids. The amino acid score of buckwheat is 100, as it contains essential amino acids like lysine, histidine, and tryptophan, and therefore is comparatively excellent nutritional source than staple foods like wheat and corn. The presence of phagopyritols, especially phagopyritols A1, that acts as an active constituent in insulin signaling, helps to treat diabetic patients besides curing polycystic ovarian syndrome. In addition, buckwheat is a rich source of minerals such as zinc, iron, calcium, manganese, potassium, copper, sodium, and selenium that are indispensable for human health. Currently, various products of buckwheat are available in the market, like cakes, pancakes, tea, honey, cookies, and soba noodles that possess efficient nutraceutical value. In this lecture, we summarized how buckwheat achieves an accelerated impetus in the functional food sector to tackle the problem of food and nutritional security. So, dear students, I hope you gained some knowledge on cultivation and utility of buckwheat. Thank you very much.